Somebody call that, please. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah, hamdan yuwafi ni'amah wa yukafi mazida. Rabbana laka alhamdu kama yanbaghi li jalali wajhika wa li 'azimi sultanik. Subhanaka la nuhsi thana'an 'alayka anta kama athnayta 'ala nafsik. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa Allah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan 'abduhu wa rasuluhu wa khaliluhu wa safiyyuhu وخير نبي أرسله الله إلى العالم كله بشيرا ونذيرا وداعيا إلى الله بإذنه وسراجا منيرا. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد صلاة وسلاما دائمين متلازمين إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. All praise and thanks are due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We seek His forgiveness, His guidance, and His assistance. And we take refuge with Him from the evil within our souls and from the consequence of our misdeeds. Wherever Allah gives guidance to, none can mislead, and whoever misleads, none can guide. I bear witness there's nothing and no one worthy of worship besides Allah alone. He has no partners. And I bear witness that Muhammad, the son of Abdullah, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, is his servant and messenger. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant him peace and extend to him our salutations on this blessed day, just as we ask him to show peace to his family members, his companions, and all of those who follow in goodness and exhibit goodwill into the meeting and the reckoning of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the Quran, the holy book in which we all believe, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us, Inna ad-deena 'inda Allah Islam. The deen or religion, or the way of life, or the life path in the sight of Allah is al-Islam. And Al-Islam is not only the name of our religion, but this verse implies also that Islam or submission is what is expected from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We see this when we reflect upon the stories and the lives of the messengers that come before Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, and that each time a new messenger had come, they were expected to follow the sharia of the previous messenger. So in that sense, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects from the human being submission to his will. That is Allah's deen. That is the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is his deen, it's not ours, it's his, belongs to him. Ad-deenu lillah. This companion, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he was reported to have said, Inna ajma'a ayatin fi kitabillah, Inna allaha ya'muru bil adli wal ihsani wa ita'i bil qurba, ila akhir ayah. He said the most comprehensive verse in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, verily Allah, he commands justice and goodwill and the giving to kindred. وَيَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنْكَرِ وَالْبَغْيِ. And he forbids indecency, evil, and transgression. So he said this verse is the most comprehensive verse in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Verily Allah commands justice. Verily Allah, he commands goodwill. And ihsan also translates as forgiveness. That Allah, he commands justice, but he also commands forgiveness. All of us have the right to justice. That we all have the right to fair treatment. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also enjoins upon us to forgive people. And this is best exhibited by the life of the Messenger ﷺ himself. We know that his conduct was said to be the conduct of the Quran, or had to be that he himself was the Quran walking. The Quran tells us that he's an uswa hasana, he's a beautiful exemplar to us. And we see the Messenger ﷺ forgiving multiple people. Not only the people of Mecca, but that the Prophet ﷺ forgave multiple people. The Prophet ﷺ, he forgave Wahshi, who was the murderer of his uncle Hamza, radiallahu anhu. When Wahshi became Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ forgave him. The Prophet ﷺ, he forgave Hind bint Utbah, the wife of Abu Sufyan, who had ripped out and cut open his belly and took his liver and ate from his liver. The Prophet, he forgave Hind. The Prophet ﷺ, of course, as we know, he forgave the people of Mecca, these individuals that spent a couple of decades, 2 decades trying to kill him and to destroy his mission. And then when he comes into Mecca, he walks in humbly and he tells the people, Man kana fi bayti Abi Sufyan fa amin, that whoever is in the house of Abu Sufyan, then he is safe. He forgave Abu Sufyan. The Prophet ﷺ, he forgave the woman who poisoned him, put poison in his food. Zainab bint al-Harith. She tried to poison the messenger in Khaybar, and the Prophet ﷺ was informed by the meat itself that the flesh of the animal that he was eating told him that this flesh is poisoned. And the Prophet ﷺ told him that this flesh tells me that it's been poisoned. And when he questioned that woman, he asked her, why did you do this? She said, I did it because you killed my husband and my brother and my uncle. And I said to myself, if this man is truly a prophet of God, then God will inform them of what I have done. And if he is not, then we'll rid ourselves of a tyrant. And so we see the Prophet ﷺ on multiple occasions that he forgave people. But after mentioning forgiveness, the Quran says, وَإِيتَاءِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى, that Allah orders us to show goodwill or to give to our kindred, to give to those who are relatives, those who are close to us, those who are related to us. That is to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in spite of calling us to fair treatment and calling us to goodwill, that Allah actually allows for us to show favoritism to our relatives. He allows for us to do that. And if anything, he's commanding us to do it. Inna Allah ya'muru bil adli wa ihsani wa ita'i dhil qurba. That Allah is ordering us to show favoritism to our blood relatives. Now, there are many different things, ways that we learned about the messenger in his life, and through his conduct, we learn him to be the most excellent and most beautiful example. But another way that we learned about the messenger alayhi salatu wasalam is through the study of his prayers. Then we learn quite a bit about what his concerns were when we look at his prayers. And in one of his prayers, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as reported by Imam al-Tirmidhi and others, he says, he prayed to Allah, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min qalbin la yakhsha. Oh Allah, I take refuge with you from a heart which is not softened or is not humble. The Quran tells us that if Allah had revealed the Quran to the mountain, then the mountain would humble itself and fall to pieces, that it would fall apart, crumble to the ground. But the heart of Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam actually was able to carry and bear that weight. This is نَزَلَ بِهِ الرُّوحُ الْأَمِينَ عَلَىٰ قَلْبِكَ لِتَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُنذِرِينَ. The trustworthy angel descended with it upon your heart. But the Prophet ﷺ, he asked, oh Allah, I take refuge from a heart which is not soft, a heart which is not humble. وَمِن دُعَاءٍ لَا يُسْمَعُ. And from a prayer which is not heard, a prayer which is not answered. And so we learn in other ahadith that the Prophet ﷺ said that among the things that could prevent your prayer from being answered is that a person, the source of your income, is haram. ثم ذكر الرجل يطيل سفر أشعث أغبر يمد يديه إلى السماء يا رب مطعمه حرام ومشربه حرام وملبسه حرام وغذي بالحرام فأنى يستجاب له. That this man, he's traveling and disheveled, and he raises his hands to the sky and oh Lord, but the source of his food is haram, the source of his drink is haram, the source of his clothing is haram. He's been nourished by haram. How can his prayer be answered? So we should do our best to ensure that the things that we're doing are not preventing our prayers from being answered. So the Prophet was concerned about his heart, the state of his heart. He was concerned about his prayer not being answered. And then he continues and says, وَمِن نَفْسٍ لَا تَشْبَعْ. And from a self or a soul which is not satiated. Rather, Allah subhanahu of the Prophet ﷺ, that he was concerned or afraid of his lust. That the individual, the human being, that we lust for many things, that it's our nature. As the one hadith says, لو كان لابن آدم واديان من مال لابتغى ثالثا. That if the son of Adam had 2 valleys of wealth, he would want a third. ولا يملأ جوف ابن آدم إلا التراب. But the only thing that's going to fill up the interior of the son of Adam is soil. It's the only thing that's going to fill up your interior, your body, is soil, dirt, when you're buried into the earth. That is our nature. But the Prophet, he took refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from this, from having a nafs la tashba'. And then he said, finally, وَمِنْ عِلْمٍ لَا يَنْفَعُ. And from knowledge which is not benefit. And from knowledge which is not benefit. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min hadhihi arba'a. Say, oh Allah, I take refuge with you from these 4. From these 4 things. From a heart which is not soft. From a prayer which is not answered. From a soul which is not gratified and satiated. And from knowledge which is not beneficial. An Andalusian scholar, a scholar from the time when Muslims ruled Spain, Ibn Juzay al-Kalbi, he speaks about knowledge. There are different types of knowledge, and he says that knowledge is either what we call sacred knowledge, shar'iyya, ulum al-shar'iyya, or alatun al-shar'iyya, or knowledge which are tools for accessing sacred knowledge, or knowledge which is neither sacred nor helps us to access sacred knowledge. When he talks about the latter, he says that knowledge, or this non-sacred knowledge, it divides into 4 types. He said one type of knowledge is ما ينفع ولا يضر. One type of knowledge, it benefits and doesn't harm anyone at all. And it gives examples. An example of this type of knowledge is the knowledge of healing, knowledge of medicine, arithmetic, mathematics. It gives examples like this. It's this beneficial knowledge. It benefits us, but it doesn't harm us through learning it. Then he said another type of knowledge is ma yadurru wa la yanfa'. A knowledge which harms, which does not benefit. And an example of this he gave was astrology. People study astrology, and what's the benefit of astrology? There's no benefit at all that comes to the human being, not to your soul, not to your body, not to anything. If anything, it can be a source of anxiety. The astrologers will tell you good things, but often they may tell you bad things as well. Right? Some people, they contact fortune tellers and on the phone, and they tell them almost everything they tell them is good. But one way to know the charlatans is that that's what they do. They always give you just always the good things. You're going to live for a long time. You're going to become rich. You're going to find love eventually. But how often do they tell you, oh, I'm sorry to tell you, you're going to die in 5 months. You're going to get cancer. You're going to get hit by a car. Right? What knowledge, what sort of benefit comes from that type of knowledge? In addition to the fact that it's a claim to know the unseen, which only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. Then he says there's a type of knowledge, huwa yadurru wa yanfa'. It said it harms and benefits, if you know it. An example of this he gave actually the study of systematic logic, we call it mantiq. And so many of the Sunnis historically were opposed to studying logic. It wasn't because they didn't want people to have sharp minds and be able to critically analyze things, because they said this is the beneficial aspect of studying logic. But he says it was harmful because he considered it a madkhal al-falsafa, an introduction to harmful types of philosophy, right? Because many of the philosophers, they rejected God, or they claimed that the universe is eternal, it had no beginning, among other things. And then he said, lastly, an example, the fourth of the types of knowledge is ma la yadurru wa la yanfa'. He said it is a type of knowledge which neither harms nor benefits. And an example of this, he says, is ilmun insab. He says the knowledge of race. He considers this an example of a type of knowledge which doesn't benefit nor harm. But he goes on and he says about this that if the individual is studying the knowledge of one's past and one's lineage, one's pedigree, that if that knowledge helps one to find in one's lineage, in one's family history, individuals who are exemplars, moral exemplars, that's a good thing. Or if there's a lesson that can be taken by knowing about your past, it's a good thing, among other issues. But this is important to reflect upon, that he's not saying that if a Muslim is concerned with his history and his past, that it's a bad thing. He's saying that, listen, if you discover the truth about your history in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does it mean anything at the end of the day if you are a wicked person? You can discover that, but still be a wicked person. As the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith, "Man batta bihi amaluhu lam yusri' bihi nasabuhu," that whoever's deeds or work slows him down, his lineage won't speed him up. Meaning that if your work slows you down from entering into the garden, then who you're related to won't accelerate your entrance into the garden. Won't do anything at all. The Arabs took pride in who their fathers were. You know who my daddy is? He did this and did that. Who's your daddy? As a matter of fact, Salman al-Farisi, the famous Sahabi, the Persian Sahabi, on one occasion, Sahabi asked him, Ibn Man Ant, he says, whose son are you? Man, who's your father? And so Salman al-Farisi responds, he says, Ana Ibn Islam. I am the son of Islam. to reinforce it. Listen, you may know those things, but at the end of the day, I'm concerned about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala thinks of me. And that is the spirit of Islam. I know who my daddy is. But you know what? I'm not going to dignify that question with an answer. Right? It's okay to know who your daddy is. If anything, the Prophet tells us in the hadith, لا ترغبوا عن آبائكم. Do not despise your forefathers. فإنه كفر بكم, because it is an act of ingratitude, an expression of ingratitude on your part. And he told us in another hadith, تعلموا من أنسابكم ما تصلون به أرحامكم. Learn enough about your lineage to the point you are able to maintain family ties. So basically the Prophet ﷺ is encouraging people to learn who their forefathers were or who their relatives are in order to maintain family ties. And then the hadith continues, فَإِنَّ صِلَةَ الرَّحِمِ مَحَبَّةٌ فِي الْأَهْلِ. Because the connection to the womb, that is the being connected with one's family, is a source of love in the family. مَحَبَّةٌ فِي الْأَهْلِ وَمِثْرَاتٌ فِي الْمَالِ. And it is a source of increase in wealth, in that if people have wealth, then you can inherit from your relatives. You know who they are, you can inherit from them, and they can inherit from you. وَمَنْسَأَةٌ فِي الْأَثَرِ. And then it is an extension of your legacy. مَنْسَأَةٌ فِي الْأَثَرِ. An extension of your legacy and the trace that you leave behind. So it's nothing negative about you knowing your history. But you just have to keep in mind that the revolution that Rasulullah ﷺ, that he caused, he introduced into the Arabian Peninsula, was a revolution of understanding. And that particular understanding, it was related to what is most important, with the entity which is most important, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That was most important. And the negative type of tribalism is when we support one another in good and evil. If anything, that is what we call tribalism. That you're one of us, and you're one of them. Regardless of what one of us do, we're going to defend them and we're going to protect them. And there are multiple hadiths about this. The Prophet condemns this type of what we call tribalism. And in one particular hadith, I'll conclude with the first khutbah. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Man nasara qawmuhu ala ghayri al-haqq, fahuwa kal-ba'ir alladhi yurdi, fahuwa yunza'u bi dhanabihi." He said, the one who supports his people in falsehood, then that person is like the camel that falls into a well, and then it is pulled out by its tail. That is to say that if a camel falls into a well, I mean, how difficult will it be for you to pull it out of the well? Because it's weak, and it's something which is basically almost impossible to do. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He grant us beneficial knowledge, that He grant us knowledge of ourselves, and that knowledge, it transforms us and helps us to become better people, inshallah. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين والمسلمات. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين نبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Islam was introduced first into the Arabian Peninsula, as we know. And it was given to God's beloved, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, who himself, he was an Arab. And even though he was an Arab, Islam is not an Arab religion. Of course, Arabic is an extremely important part of Islam, because the Quran was revealed in Arabic. And the sciences of Islam are largely in the Arabic language. And we should be learning Arabic. And there are even aspects of Arab culture which we consider to be part of Islam. But the Prophet ﷺ did not come, as we know, to make everyone into Arabs. It was given to them. They had favor with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we look into the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we see that He gives us many different parables. He gives us what we can call archetypes in the Quran. He gives us the archetype of Banu Israel, of the children of Israel, who were favored by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then they fell from Allah's grace. The reason why those stories about the children of Israel are in the Quran are not for us to just simply say, yeah, those Jews, they do that. It's not about that. It's not about to make us hate Jews. That's not what those stories are in there for. Those stories are in there for us to reflect on ourselves, to teach us like what we should not do. Because there's Banu Israel while they were enslaved, and then there was Banu Israel after liberation. Because they didn't straighten up after liberation right away. Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, he underwent many trials because of Banu Israel, that they tested him, they tested his patience. Even when the man was killed and they came to Musa alayhi salatu wasalam and asking him, like, ask Allah to tell us who killed this man. And then Allah tells them to tell them to go slaughter a cow. They said, well, why can't He just give us an answer? Are you serious? Are you serious? And Musa, a'udhu billahi an akuna min al-jahilin. I take refuge in Allah that I be among the insolent ones, the ignorant people. Allah gives them command that they showed ingratitude, they showed cowardice, they showed miserliness, they showed many different things that happened. And I'll have time to go into all of these examples. But we have the examples of this. And we also find that even among the people of Pharaoh, there will always be people who are there who decry injustice. The Quran talks about رَجُلٌ يَكْتُمُ إِيمَانَهُ, that there was a man amongst the people of Pharaoh who was concealing his faith. And then among the people of Musa alayhi salam was a man who, he went to the market one day and he found them arguing with one of the cops, and Musa helped him and accidentally killed the man because he said he's one of our people and he's one of their people. He killed the man, and then he knew immediately, he said, that's not what I intended. This is from the work of Satan. And he asked Allah's forgiveness. Then the following day, or later on, he returns and finds this man arguing again. And he realizes at this moment that you're just a disputatious person. You're just a troublesome person. But Musa, in that story, in particular in Surah Al-Qasas, he says, he turns to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, قَالَ رَبِّي بِمَا أَنْدَمْتَ عَلَيَّ فَلَنْ أَكُونَ ظَهِيرًا لِلْمُجْرِمِينَ. Oh Allah, because of your grace upon me, I will not support the criminals. And the criminals, by criminals, he meant in this case, he's talking about the individual who was among the member of the oppressed. He wasn't talking about, in this particular instance, among the members of the oppressor class. So we have to be very clear that Islam does not allow for us to just simply take a tribalistic posture towards anybody. But this is become the norm in our society today, that people are making it simple for us. Okay, well, this is the oppressor class, these are the oppressed classes. And you always have to be with the oppressed, regardless of anything. You have everything negative to say about the oppressor class and everything positive or silence when the oppressed class has anything to say. So I wish there was more time. I don't want to run into Salat al-Asr, but these are lessons, important lessons for us. We take from the Messenger ﷺ, from his character, from his prayers, and from his teachings with regard to the importance of knowing who we are and what aspect of knowing who we are is important. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us. We ask Allah to assist us and guide us in all that we do. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to solidify our brotherhood and our sisterhood, inshallah. and improve our condition in spite of things that look very grim and gloomy in this world, that we can be lights and we can be sources of hope for those around us. So hopefully Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make us light, to place light in our eyes, in our ears, in our hair, in our faces, in our everything, right? And magnify that light, and so that we can be looked upon as the source of healing in the society, rather than individuals who continue to contribute to the polarization of our societies, because that's what a Muslim is supposed to do, that we contribute to the healing of our societies. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين اللهم حبب إلينا الإيمان وزينه في قلوبنا وكره إلينا الكفر والفسوق والعصيان واجعلنا من الراشدين ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم اللهم اغفر للمسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات واغفر لنا اللهم معهم بفضلك وإحسانك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم إنا نسألك الجنة وما يقرب إليها من قول وعمل ونعوذ بك من النار وما يقرب إليها من قول وعمل اللهم آت أنفسنا تقواها وزكها أنت خير من زكاها أنت وليها ومولاها ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وقنا عذاب النار وقنا عذاب النار وصل اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه الأخيار وسلم تسليما كثيرا وسبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. أقم الصلاة.